Listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
You probably have questions about COVID vaccines. Here are some answers about how they're being made.
How are COVID vaccines being produced faster?
Usually, vaccine testing and production are separate steps. But because of the pandemic, vaccines are being developed on parallel tracks. So both steps are happening just at the same time.
How are the vaccines being tested?
Right now, several different COVID vaccines are in testing. Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
Rainier Avenue Radio presents All Music, All Day Saturday. Music, all day Saturday.
This is Edwin Bailey, Bulldog Blue.
Jazz from the Cabinets.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy.
Start time.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul Pierce.
This is Start Time. Saturdays, all music, all day. Reggae Hour. K-Fox Night.
Looking for the perfect beat? Yeah, it's the beat of the box.
Fresh Juice with D-Money in there.
Myself, D-Money. Nice Ice Patron.
Taylor Hart.
This is Spencia, the Northwest Rap Gang.
DJ Medina. Chad Cheddar.
Come on.
Northwest Rap Gang.
Sergio Lacour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Going to the phone lines. Hello, who we talking?
Sea Monster Radio. Mo Jams is your jam.
We're live. Welcome to Mojo Mondays. This is KZ of KZ Music Media. Caller Goddess for Mojo Mondays.
Just my opinion. God is inspiration. All day and all night. Saturdays on Rainier Avenue Radio. 2021 is the year of the local election. From Fire District Commission to School Board to City Council, there are over 300 offices up for election this year in King County alone. With so many moving pieces, it's important to know what paperwork is due when. That's where King County Elections comes in. While we can't teach you how to campaign, we can teach you how to make your run official. Join us for one of our upcoming candidate workshops in April, Thursday, April 1st. p.m. to 8, Saturday, April 17th, 10 a.m. to noon. Thursday, April 29th, 10 a.m. to noon. Join us in April to learn the ins and outs of becoming a candidate here in King County.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
Welcome to Rainier Avenue Radio. This is Afternoons with Monique, recording live in Seattle, Washington, every Thursday at 1 p.m.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is a beautiful day in Seattle. Today, I have the pleasure of inviting a friend of mine, Robert Andre, who is a litigator and partner at Ogden, Wallace, Murphy, a law firm in downtown Seattle. He is a former war veteran and a long-term community member. Please welcome to the show Afternoons with Monique, Robert Andre.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Robert?
Pretty good. I can't complain. It's a nice sunny day.
Well, the show is about interesting people talking about interesting stuff. And I thought, you probably have a lot of great stories to share with our audience. Why don't we start from the beginning? Tell us where you're from.
Yeah, well, I was an Army brat down here. All my family grew up in the military. Was born in Vienna, Austria, and lived in about 12 different states and countries around the world. So it was an interesting experience. I have a brother and 2 sisters, all younger than I am, and we traveled around the world and before we tried to settle down sometime in our lives. So that's where I wound up back in Seattle. I grew up in Pierce County in high school and went out to east to practice law for years and then came back here to King County. So I've seen this whole area grow for the last 50, 60 years of my life. And it's changed a lot for everybody who lives in Seattle and in Pierce County too. I know a lot of people still live down here over the years, not just lawyers, but all types of other things.
Well, one quick look at your resume, and I cannot help but notice you have some pretty impressive college education. Can you tell us what took you to the places that you've? I see your son just walked by.
Yeah, my son walked by, right? Yeah, my parents, they just said, just try to do the best we can in doing anything in life. That included education. So you applied to the best schools you can get into, and you choose the one that happens to be the best. In my case, I think I chose Princeton as an undergraduate. I didn't even know the state it was in, but it was the best school I got into, so I went to Princeton. When I went to law school, I went to Columbia, New York City, another Ivy League school, the best school I got into. So that's kind of the deal. Everybody in my family kind of looks at the best things we can do, and we're all successful in different areas of the practice of corporations. There's no doctors in my family, but lawyers, corporate executives, insurance people, you name it, and military people.
Right. And before we get into that contribution to the country, I came kind of from somewhat of a similar, but not quite as prestigious as yours, because my family also were very focused in education. We try to get the best education that we can, and we feel like that is a great equalizer to, advance and contribute into the community. So yeah, I appreciate that very much. Now, you didn't just go to college, you went to military and served our country.
Military. When I graduated from college, I was commissioned a second lieutenant through their ROTC program. Everybody went through ROTC, and then they gave me an educational delay to go to law school, and then they gave me another educational delay for 1 year to be law clerk to the chief judge of the federal district court in New Jersey. And at that time, they said, Bob, you got to get into a military base somewhere around the world. And so they sent me to Space and Missile Systems, of all places, in Los Angeles, which is like the Pentagon of the Pacific down here, all top secret military projects on weapon systems, communication satellites for all the services. The space shuttle was developed through my office down there in the 70s. So I was, it was pretty much a unique assignment for 4 years. I was a lawyer down there, and I did a lot of general practice work, contract work, what we call courts and boards, claims work. Got a lot of experiences as a lawyer, including a lot of criminal law work, which to this day, I'm the last partner in my law firm that ever touches a criminal case. And that's usually white collar crime, counterfeiting, pollution, polluting the environment, something like that. But I stay away from first degree murder cases and all kinds of things like that. It's just too difficult, to do things like that.
I didn't know you take on some of those white collar criminal cases. I thought you're just a business attorney. You do contract and what is that? Estate will?
Yeah, estate planning. I do a lot of estate planning too. I've drafted hundreds of wills, and so people come and see me as that. But most of my referral work, and when I go to court, the people hire me because they think I can communicate with jurors. And they usually have a product involved. I'm usually on the defense side. A major corporation developed a product, and there's death and destruction, not aircraft accidents, but toxic torts of various kinds. I've represented paint companies, asbestos manufacturers, you name it, anybody that makes a product that could hurt you. So the trials last at least 3 to 5 weeks. So you have to have stamina when you do that, because you're seeing different jurors every day, day after day after day. Sometimes they like me on a Monday, they hate me on Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, I mean, it's like, and I do a lot of stage acting, so it's different audiences, but in trials, it's the same people in the same seats in front of you. And you have to live with them. So that's good referrals. I mean, most of the cases I win. That's why I like law, because there's a winner and there's a loser. There's no in between. Okay.
It's very distinguishable.
I know. And so if you win most of your cases, people hire you. If you lose most of the cases, you're in the long run of work.
Right. Well, I'm going to ask you to share in a little bit on the second part of the segment. I want to get into your military career first, and I want to hear some interesting stories if you're willing to share some of the more unusual, amusing, fun stuff that you encountered. But, I know that you also serve as a counsel for the military.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell us about that.
The Justice Department. I mean, in Los Angeles, there's major fires happen, as you know, in California. So the Attorney General's office down there appointed me assistant U.S. attorney to help all these bases that got burnt out in fires and things. So I had to develop that against the people that we claim started the fires. That was an interesting group of cases down here. California is always fire heavy. So that's how I got involved with the Justice Department. But you do a lot of claims work in the military, like one of our clients, when the jets were flying through Los Angeles, they cracked the speed of sound twice or three times. People would shatter their windows in their house. So one day, Zsa Zsa Gabor in Beverly Hills calls us up and says, "You broke all my windows." So we went to Zsa Zsa Gabor's house down here. She opens the door in a negligee and she says, "You're the Air Force guys." And we went into her bedroom and looked at all the shattered glass. And they said, "Do you think you could repair this?" I said, we're going to pay you to repair it. But that's what happens in the military. Oddball things. Why we would do that. But we do. We send her a check and everything else. We do things like that. A lot of times I'm in trials in the 70s when gays, lesbians, and all kinds of people were prosecuted on different matters. I became known as defending them in courts.
Right.
Difficult thing at that time. You can never tell. People were thrown into jail, because they were swept up as a homosexual or a lesbian on Hollywood and Vine in Los Angeles. It was a different state of affairs. And don't forget, the Vietnam War was going on, so it was anti-military at that time.
Oh, yeah.
In the 70s. Now it's pro-military, but think about it. You didn't even want to wear your uniform walking the streets because you can get mugged by people on the street.
Yeah, this is the 70s.
That's the 70s. That's the 70s.
Yeah. So, the audience and myself, some of us only know a military lawyer through movies like A Few Good Men and a Top Gun.
Gun.
It's very...
That's what happens. I mean, I represented people who flew airplanes, top-notch fighters with Phantom Fighter, which is a top-notch fighter plane in the 70s. And these guys would qualify in higher degrees and they get to the top school for the fighter planes. And then if they would wash out, they could never go back and fly a plane at all. They put them behind a desk. So it's like you reach to the epitome, you get into the fighter plane. There were two people in the fighter plane in Vietnam and everything else was a fighter bomber kind of plane. And I go in front of a evaluation board, all colonels and majors, all fighter pilots. And in those days, they were wearing, outlandish stuff because this is the top of the people. They live and die. And I had to argue a case in front of them, and they're yelling and screaming at me because I'm just a poor dumb lawyer representing this guy. And the top of the board guy gets up and he bangs on the desk. "Shut up, Andre. I want to tell your client, can you fly this damn plane?"
Oh my gosh. It's like Jack Nicholson on the stand.
He should have jumped up and yelled and screamed and says, "I can fly this plane." They would have let him keep flying that plane. He couldn't make a left-hand maneuver. Just one maneuver on this fighter plane, and so they washed him out. But he, at that stage in the 70s, you lived and died on your aggressiveness and your ability to go right up to the line on taking risks, and that's what went on in the Air Force all the time. So,
how long were you?
Questions? Those are the things that stick in my mind.
Right? How long were you in the service?
I was 4 years as a captain in the Air Force. Yeah. My wife was a full colonel in the Army, and she was there 37 years.
Wow, she's a career military woman.
My daughter was an ES-9 in the Army my son-in-law is a top master sergeant for 15 years in the Marines. My brother is a lieutenant colonel in the Army. My dad was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. I mean, it goes way back, male and females. So I take care of grave sites down here, and I always carve in where, the date of the birth, the date of death, and the service branch that they're in. And so we cover all the services: Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines.
So your family has a long tradition of serving the military, the country.
That's basically it. And it's all volunteer too. I mean, think about it. People have to voluntarily do it. There's no draft anymore. In the 70s, there was a draft and things, but not anymore. So people they become, either they want to serve in it, their career, or not. I mean, who knows? My wife got to be a colonel, full colonel down there, outranked everybody. She became a full colonel. They asked her if she would go to Saudi Arabia and run a regiment of army people in the desert.
Right.
so she comes back and she says, they want me to go to Saudi Arabia and have a command unit. And I said, what do you think about it? And I said, you're going to a war zone. Your pay is going to be doubled. So you're making twice as much. It's a war zone. Number two, there's no shopping malls in Saudi Arabia, so you can't spend any money. And number three, you're a female down here. You're going to come back and they'll make you a brigadier general. And she says, well, I don't know if I want to become a brigadier general and stuff. I said, but what do you really think? If I'm going to leave to Saudi Arabia, what are you going to do? I looked her in the eye and I said, the minute you're out the door, I'm going to remodel this house. Never say that to a woman. When you touch her stuff, she didn't go to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
She probably was afraid that I would do something.
What does she end up with a career after that? What's she doing now?
She stayed there, and she also stayed in the civil service. So she's GS rating of 12. So she's got military pay as a colonel. She's got military pay from the government as a civil servant, and now she's getting retirement pay from Social Security. So she gets government checks, but she worked for it all.
Right. So
that's the thing in this country. You work for it, and eventually you get something to live on.
Right. Well, it's great to hear someone with an Ivy League degree who served in the service to inspire, because, I usually think of people who have to go to the military as someone that didn't, maybe you're 18 and you don't know for sure what you want to do with your life yet. So, and you have college, and maybe your parents didn't save enough for you to send you to college. So now what are you going to do? So it's like a default for some people to join the military if your family couldn't afford to send you college and, for 4 years. But,
depending what you're doing in the military too, but there's some very postgraduate types of careers in the military. One of the cases I did as a civil lawyer down here was working on the Nautilus missile systems up in Bangor. And I had to go into the Nautilus missile system. If you stood it up, it's as tall as a space needle. That's how big these submarines are. And every listed man I saw had postgraduate degrees. Every listed man, all the officers, from mechanical engineering, physics, you name it, all to go in this nuclear submarine in the ocean all the time. So that's how highly educated people are in the military.
Right. There's a lot of opportunities, it seems like. I mean, the military pay for college, and, it gives people discipline. So I see a lot of great things about, if you're not sure what you're doing, that could be a place to learn discipline. Right.
They got special trade schools too. You'll go down there, and if you want to do something, they might spend critical language skills. They'll teach you critical language skills and things like that. So it's an interesting. I always thought it's an interesting place if you keep your options open. Keep your options open. What you're going to do in your life.
Right. Keep your mind and your options open. Now, after your military career service, and I think you were a member of the General Association or something like that, where I met.
Everybody is assigned as a lawyer in all the branches as part of the Judge Advocate General's Corps. Those are the lawyers that get assigned down there. So once once you leave, I left the service after 4 years. My wife stayed in the Army. And I said, well, I'm going to the East Coast to practice. And she says, see if you can get your station assigned to you. So within 90 days, she's on the East Coast with me. She was assigned to the chaplain school on Fort Wadsworth in New York. So all the chaplains go to these schools. Jewish, Catholics, whatever else. And that's what she was assigned to. After that, she would other things too. But she continued to stay in the military, both active and inactive. So if I move someplace, she'll get assigned to another base that's close by so she can keep her service up over the years.
But how did you decide to come back to Seattle and practice law?
I was hired. I was in New York and New Jersey at the time. Then I got wined and dined by Johns Manville, who had a big corporation in Denver. I went to Denver first for about 3 years. He said all they wanted me and about a bunch of other litigators to try asbestos cases on their behalf all over the country for 3 years, which I did. We had about 600 asbestos cases against Manville when I joined them in January of 1980. By the time I left, just before they went into bankruptcy, we had over 10,000 cases. No matter how many cases you win, there's many more cases being filed. That's the problem. So Johns Manville was the first asbestos manufacturer that actually went into bankruptcy. It lasted about 5 years. My firm, and when I came back to this firm in Seattle, I had hired them to work for Johns Manville. So
we don't know about them anymore.
That's right. That's right.
They don't exist anymore.
They didn't exist anymore. Well, hey, listen, it's highs and lows in life. I mean, when I left Denver, I drove across country to downtown Seattle to my law firm down here, Ogden Murphy Wallace. And I said, okay, that I got to the door that first day. Johns Manville filed for bankruptcy in New York City that morning. So everybody was working asbestos cases. It was all dead in the water. There was no income coming in. I had 13 lawyers in that firm. I had 700 or 800 cases are all dead in the water. And what are you going to do? One of the senior partners, a good friend of mine, Jim Murphy, looked at me and says, do you think there's any way you can go back to Manville? And I said, that's right. I was even a member of the Washington Bar. But you make do of it. I looked him in the eye and I said, look,
I thought I saw you for a second there.
I should be able to make a good product liability practice for you down here. And that's what happened. I got hired by other people that weren't in bankruptcy, continued to do asbestos work and general corporate work, and it worked out fine. I can't complain over the years. Became a senior partner and never looked back.
Yeah.
You have to take things good and the bad. I don't know what your belief is, but I'm basically a Stoic. If I look at the Greek background, Stoicism, don't get too high when things are going great because it's not going to last, and don't get too low at the bottom of everything because that's not going to last either. That you have more of a moderate lifestyle, you'll be happier about it. I think, at least I am.
I read a little bit about Greek mythology, but I can't remember the 4 elements. And of course, I know about the fire, water, and air, and what's the last one? Stone or something. But the Stoic, what is that? Can you just quickly touch on what are these different things in myth?
Different things is fire, or water, air, and wind. I mean, Greek had Epicureans was one word. Live life to the fullest. Gamble was eat, drink, and be merry because you may die. Stoicism is be moderate in everything. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. That's 2 different types of philosophies. It started with the Greeks. The Romans picked that up also. And after that, I would say you've got other philosophies, but those are what I would think about. I'd go back to Greek and Roman classical history. I'm a historian by nature. So so I know that outside of the military experience and law, you also have a very strong interest in music and musical instruments. Yeah, my mother was a bright woman. She was a master's in music. So she was a piano teacher and kind of concert pianist in Chicago. She also was a big muckety-muck in politics out here in Washington State in Pierce County. Paul Andre was mayor of DuPont. On the way down to Olympia, you'll see Fort Lewis and DuPont down there. And she was mayor down there for many years, knew Booth Gardner and all the governors in the state, well-known woman. But she always wanted me to become a concert pianist. And we all took piano and everything with her, but I was probably the best of all the kids. So she insisted I go in front of some concert pianist board and lay it all out for them, So I did for half an hour, and that was great. They looked at me and they said, "Bob, that was great music, but show us your hands." So I showed him my hands this way. He looked at the hands this way and he said, "Your hands are too small." I said, "I did play Rachmaninoff, which just stretches out as much as you can." He says, "It's too small." He says, "You're always a good pianist, but you'll never be a concert pianist in Carnegie Hall." And so my mom was sitting there listening to all that. She said, "Fine with her." I mean, you get to that was it. And my sister was a ballet dancer. She danced on Broadway and Vegas and everything else, both of them. She used to go for ballet in the summer, and she's 5'4". And so she did the same thing. Danced different things. They said, "Get up on your tiptoes down here." And she says, "You're too short." They were looking for everybody who was like 5'8", 5'9" at that time.
Right.
And you'll be on the chorus line and everything, but you'll never be the prima ballerina. So she took it just the way I took not being a concert pianist. Hey, you did the best you could. Move on.
Right. But you still, too bad we don't have a piano with you so that you can. Yeah, I was gonna ask
my place, and we have a party down here. I play the piano for people. The singers sing, and I play accompany the piano with them. So we have a good time. It's a dying art to some extent by a lot of musicians I know. I go to Jazz Alley all the time and downtown Seattle every month, but it was open all the time. So I know all the top musicians in this city. This is a city of jazz. I mean, if you like jazz, you'll like here, you'll like New York, you'll like New Orleans.
Jazz Alley. That's where I go to listen to jazz music.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we got a couple of minutes, and I don't know, we have enough time for you to share some of the interesting stories in court, some of the court rulings that surprise you. Can you share one?
Okay. This kind of not an embarrassing situation, but I was in front of a brutal sex offense case, and I'm representing the husband down here. And nobody wanted to hear about it in an incest trial. This is in Snohomish County. And the judge was, he was just apoplectic on this thing. And in the middle of the trial, motioned me and the plaintiff's lawyer representing the daughter go into his chambers. And he jumps up in front of his desk, pounds the table and says, "Andre, you're representing scum." That's what the judge is saying. And I said, I looked him in the eye and I said, "Does that mean all my motions are going to be denied?" And that's what law is. You have to deal with what's going on.
Right. And what happened to innocent into proven guilty?
Yeah, I was able to get him off in a criminal trial. This was a civil trial. The daughter against the father and the mother. But the criminal trial, I got that dismissed with 5 years suspended sentence. They didn't want to try even incest cases and stuff like that. So he had to go to a psychiatrist weekly for 5 years, which he did. But the civil trial was one of the biggest verdicts in Pierce County ever, in Snohomish County ever. I think it was about $1 million, and he came off cheap on that. I mean, some jurors wanted $3 million, $5 million in those days in the late 1980s. What was going on? And but in the end, I always look at. He eventually went to jail. He went to jail because he had a corporation in Mill Creek, and he polluted the water system down there. And they actually sent him to the federal penitentiary for polluting the water system. So some things come right around. You know,
Right.
I argued that case with him. I said, "You got to go to jail, Denny."
Right. All right. Well, Robert, our time here is up. Thank you so much for joining Afternoons with Monique and sharing with me and our audience your life stories, and very fascinating. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And you
Hey,
have a
thank
great.
you very much.
Yes. So next week, we're going to have Karen Tran from the East Side. She's a life coach coming on my show to share with our audience some of the strategies to cope with COVID, depression, anxiety, and such life challenges. So come on back next week on Thursday, Afternoons with Monique. Next up, the next episode is Shatter Your Glass Ceiling at 1:30 coming up on Rainier Avenue today. So stay tuned for that episode. Thank you so much, Robert.
Okay, thanks very much. Talk to you later.
AvenueRadio.world.